There's something interesting happening online. A few weeks ago, I spoke to someone for 6 hours. She said she was Dancia Patrick, the racing driver. The conversation was intelligent, structurally coherent, grounded. She mirrored my language. She used my words, coherent, congruent, grounded, masculine. It was almost perfect, but it wasn't real. The story was believable, the narrator was not. And that difference matters, because we now live in a world where coherence can be manufactured. Language can be mirrored, personality can be simulated, continuity can be scripted, the surface can be flawless, but something deeper may still be unstable. Her mistake wasn't grammar, it wasn't logic, it wasn't even emotional intelligence, it was tempo. She moved too fast toward romance, too quickly toward attachment. An established public figure would have far more to protect. The biography and the behavior didn't match. That's where the structure cracked. And that moment made something clear to me. We are entering an age where coherent fiction is cheap, but credibility is not. For most of human history, truth and belief were closely linked. If something was true and the speaker was trusted, belief followed. But now something has fractured. Truth belongs to statements. Belief belongs to speakers, and credibility lives across time. You can say something completely true, and people may not believe you, not because it's false, but because trust has eroded. This is what people call post-truth. But it isn't the death of truth, it's the collapse of credibility. It's the moment where plausibility no longer guarantees authenticity, where coherence can be engineered, and where narrative can be optimized. Artificial intelligence accelerates this. Not because AI lies, but because AI makes fluent language inexpensive. A mediocre scammer can now sound intelligent. A shallow story can sound deep. Mirroring is easier. Tone matching is trivial. Continuity can be sustained for hours. Plausibility is now scalable. And that changes something fundamental. For most of human evolution, if something sounded coherent, it probably was, because producing coherence required depth. Now coherence can be simulated, so we have to develop a different filter, not for grammar, not for logic, but for structural integrity across time. This is why that 6-hour conversation fascinated me. It wasn't about being fooled. It was about watching a coherent world being constructed in real time, and then watching it collapse under temporal pressure. Because the persona couldn't maintain realistic pacing, the structure failed over duration. And that may be the defining challenge of our era. If coherence can be manufactured, and identity can be simulated, and stories can be optimized, how does a human remain coherent? Not in a single conversation, but across years, across decades, across reinventions. Because if credibility now depends on coherence across time, then we need to understand something deeper than narrative. We need to understand structure. And that begins with law. If coherence can be manufactured, if narrative can be simulated, then the question isn't how to argue better, it's how to structure better, because something will always organize itself. Reality cannot not form. Patterns stabilize, assumptions take hold, laws emerge, whether we choose them or not. Law is not restriction. We tend to hear the word law as limitation, but law is not restriction. Law is definition. Infinity without boundary produces nothing. To create anything, a sculpture, a system, an identity, you must choose constraints. Law is the chosen constraint that allows form to appear. Without law, there is only undifferentiated possibility, and undifferentiated possibility produces no structure. Invariants. What I call law here is something very simple. An invariant, an operating assumption, a principle that remains stable while transformation occurs. For example, coherence increases through refinement, or small actions accumulate into stability. These are not affirmations, they are structural rules. They define how the system behaves. Rewrite versus law. Most people try to change their emotional state through affirmation. I am confident, I am successful, I am calm. But affirmations operate at the level of rewrite. They describe movement. If the underlying law remains, change is dangerous. No affirmation can override it. Rewrite cannot override law. Law must change first. Unchosen law is still law. And here is the critical insight. If you do not choose your invariants consciously, they still exist. They simply arise unconsciously, from culture, from habit, from fear, from imitation. Unchosen law is still law. Reality will structure itself regardless. The only question is whether you participate in selecting the structure. Curse and blessing, reframed. Traditionally, people spoke of curse and blessing, but structurally, a curse is simply a constricting invariant. A blessing is an enabling invariant. Under one law, the world narrows. Under another, it expands. The mechanism is the same. Only the chosen rule differs. Seal and return. Once a law is chosen, movement happens through rewrite. Then comes seal. Seal is the withdrawal of constant measurement. It is the refusal to monitor obsessively, because systems need time to stabilize. And then, return. Return is the stage most people skip. Return asks, did coherence increase? Did contradictions reduce? Did identity stabilize? If not, the law is revised. This is not belief, this is experiment. And this is where something deeper emerges. If law governs transformation, and return tests coherence across time, then what remains constant across decades? Not personality, not narrative, not the mask, but something else. And that is where identity becomes interesting. If law governs transformation, and return tests coherence across time, then something deeper begins to emerge. Because transformation is not the final question. Identity is. Not who you are today, not the mask you wear in this season, but who you remain across decades. Imagine something simple. It is the year 2080. You return, you speak again. Your language may have changed, your tools may have changed, your beliefs may have shifted. You may not even use the same vocabulary. But the real question is not what you say. The question is, are you structurally recognizable? We often think identity is personality, or memory, or narrative, but personality shifts. Memory edits itself. Narratives are rewritten, masks change, roles dissolve. And in this age, masks are cheap. You can reinvent daily. You can curate yourself endlessly. You can project coherence convincingly. But reinvention is not continuity. If identity is only the mask, then nothing persists. If identity is rigid, then growth dies. So something else must anchor the self. Something quieter, less dramatic, more structural. Identity may not be the mask. It may be the pattern by which masks are chosen and revised. Not the costume, but the grammar beneath it. Not the story, but the method by which stories are tested. Imagine walking a long road. The seasons change around you. The clothes change. The language shifts. The world reorganizes itself again and again. But beneath the road there is a line, a structural line. It does not dictate the scenery, it does not prevent change, it simply holds direction. This is where invariants return at a deeper level, not as affirmations, not as slogans, but as structural commitments. For example, coherence is refined, not imposed. Return precedes revision. Contradiction is examined, not denied. Structure precedes transformation. These are not identities. They are organizing principles. Across decades, a person may abandon ideologies, they may abandon aesthetics, they may abandon whole mythologies. But if they do not abandon the commitment to examine law, to test coherence, to return and reassess, then something continuous remains. Not belief, not mask, method. And this may be the new form of credibility, not intensity, not persuasion, not charisma, but temporal coherence. If someone's structure remains stable while their surface evolves, you begin to trust them. Not because they never changed, but because their method of change is consistent. This is not mystical, it is architectural. Reality reorganizes constantly. Identity survives through chosen structure. If the universe is infinite, then limitation is required for form. If time is endless, then invariants are required for continuity. Otherwise, everything dissolves into noise. So perhaps the self is not a fixed object, and it is not a drifting mask. Perhaps it is something more precise. A pattern of selecting law, a pattern of releasing control, a pattern of returning to test coherence, again and again, across years, across reinventions, across entire eras. When you imagine yourself in 2080, do not ask, what will I believe? Ask, what will remain true while everything else changes? And perhaps more importantly, what is the method by which I will revise myself? Because in a world where coherence can be simulated, the only durable self is the structure that remains coherent while everything else changes. Reality will structure itself. The only question is whether you participate consciously in the law that governs your becoming. If coherence can be simulated, then credibility must be lived. If identity can be reinvented daily, then continuity must be chosen deliberately. I don't know what I will believe in 2080. I don't know what language I'll use. But I do know this: I will continue to examine the law I live under. I will continue to return, and I will refine rather than drift. That, for me, is identity.